Yes. We're down to 10 seconds and they're going to all join us back.
Okay.
Kathy, did you lose Scott? Oh, there he is.
No, I'm here. I shut the door.
We both have dogs that might bark, so we apologize for that. Okay, I think we did lose someone else. So
Kathy, you can take your son to DBAT. My friend owns DBAT.
oh, thanks. I'll check
You
that
should
out.
do that. You'll love it.
Okay, I would like to introduce Julia from the Baseball Heritage Museum, and she is going to be introducing Scott to us. Take it away, Julia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out today. I am Julia with the Baseball Heritage Museum. We are located in the historic League Park in the Huff neighborhood of Cleveland. As Scott mentioned earlier today, 100 years ago, that team had a World Series win. Well, won the World Series, not all win. We've won World Series games since then. So the Baseball Heritage Museum has a marvelous collection of artifacts from the Negro Leagues, the Latin and Caribbean leagues, and a lot of historical information, just things that are culturally significant for this community. We are open we have a shop that is, or not a shop, our museum is open Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Also, we have a variety of speaker series such as Scott. So if you like this material, you can tune in and check us out on social media. And one of our fabulous speakers and experts is Scott Longert. So thank you for your time and representing the museum.
Thanks, Julia, and good evening, everybody. It's great to be here, though not in person, to talk about Cleveland baseball. And we touched on that it's been 100 years ago when the Indians won their very first World season, and it's just about exactly to the date. The Indians clinched the pennant at the end of September and went on to the World Series to play against the Brooklyn Robins and brought home our very first World Series. Now, in 1920 in Cleveland, this was quite a town. We were the 5th largest city in the entire United States. We were heavily populated. Our numbers had doubled in less than 10 years to about 800,000 people. And this was a real vibrant city with a big population downtown. We were still one of the largest automakers in the entire United States. Winton Motors was still going strong. Alexander Winton had started building automated cars in the 1890s, and Winton produced fine quality cars. We had the Chandler Company, Peerless Motors, and White Motors was now basically doing trucks, but they had been in the business for at least about 20 years. So we were quite a center for making cars and for producing parts, which was a very important part of the industry with tires and other car parts. Downtown Cleveland was where you had to do your shopping because all the department stores were there. Higbee's and Halley's and May Company and Rosenblum's clothes for men, as well as Taylor's. So there was a variety of department stores downtown and much to do with lots of restaurants downtown, a lot of hotels. And the key theater, which was known for vaudeville at the time. They would bring in acts that would sing and dance. They brought in acrobats. It was very popular. And this was on the edge of what was going to be Playhouse Square. There were plans already in motion to go ahead and build other theaters like the Allen, the Hannah, the Stillmore. And within a few years, Playhouse Square would be the place to go. And in downtown Cleveland, we had the office of the League of Women Voters. It had just been established as women had got the right to vote the previous year, and the League of Women Voters set up and is still an important organization today. Now, our 1920 Indians, they were not really an overnight success. We can go back to 1916 to see the team that was built around Tris Speaker, a star center fielder, one of the best in all of baseball. And he was acquired by the ball club from our new owner. His name was Jim Dunn. Everybody called him Sonny Jim. He was from Chicago. He was a railroad contractor. And when the Indians became available, Dunn decided to buy the ball club, as being in Chicago, the Cubs and the White Sox were not going to be for sale. So if you wanted a ball club, you had to take what was available, and the Indians were. So Jim Dunn came to Cleveland, paid $500,000 for the ball club, and he told folks that to be patient. I promise I will build you a winner, but it's going to take a little bit of time. The 1950 Indians had been one of the worst teams in the American League. They were just awful. But by bringing in Tris Speaker, that gave the fans a big shot in the arm and showed that Jim Dunn was serious about what he said. To get Speaker here from Boston, Dunn had to pay $50,000 to the Boston owner. At the time, that was the most money ever paid for a ball player. But Speaker was worth the money. A tremendous hitter, best outfielder in the game, a real leader. He'd be a great asset here in Cleveland with Speaker on our ball club. Along with Speaker in 1916, we had some good ball players. We had a ways to go, but they were already here in guys like Ray Chapman, who was our starting shortstop. Ray was born and raised in Kentucky. He came from a coal miner background, an excellent shortstop. He could make all the plays, a very good hitter, and probably the best bunter in the entire American League. At the time, bunting was very, very important because the ball was dead. You played for one run at a time. So if you came to bat with a runner on base and nobody out, you were expected to sacrifice. And Ray was one of the best around at moving the runners along. He could steal bases. He was very fast. And he was a very popular guy, very well liked by everyone on the team. He had quite a few friends in Cleveland. He could play the piano and sing. And Ray was known for, on the long train trips when the guys would be going to New York or Boston or down Washington, after dinner, Ray would go to the parlor car with some of his buddies. If there was a piano there, he'd go to the piano, play some of the popular tunes of the day, and sing. And before long, people from all over the train would gather. You'd have 100 people in the parlor lounge listening to Ray play the piano. So he was a very well-liked guy and well-established as our shortstop, one of the best we've had. Now we have one of the best in Frankie Lindor, but Ray Chapman was right up there with Omar Vizquel and Lou Boudreau and several others as one of the best shortstops ever to play for Cleveland. Our second baseman was Bill Wamby. His real name was Wambsgans, but it was very long. So the scorers asked him if he would mind they change his name to Wamby. So it fit very well in the score sheets, and he didn't mind. And from that point on, he became known as Wamby. He would even sign his autographs and letters to people as Wamby. A very good second baseman, very solid. He made a really good double play combination with Ray Chapman. They were one of the best in baseball. And Bill himself went to school and studied to be a minister. His father was a minister and wanted his son to follow in his footsteps. But in the summers, Bill would play baseball. He started to realize he'd much rather be a ball player than a minister. So one day he took a deep breath, went to see his father and said, "Dad, I don't want to be a minister. I want to be a ball player." And he grimaced for what he would hear. But he was surprised because his dad smiled and said, if you want to be a ball player, you have my blessing. And Bill put the ministry aside and became a professional ball player, where the Indians signed him and brought him to Cleveland. Probably didn't hurt that Bill's father was a baseball fan, so that probably helped him along in his speech to his dad. Our catcher was Steve O'Neill. Behind the plate, had been there for several years. O'Neill was one of the toughest guys in all of baseball. He was a former coal miner from the time he was a child to an adult, and he liked to block home plate and let runners slam into him and let them fall off the plate. He tagged them out. A lot of the people complained about it because sometimes he blocked the plate without having the ball yet. And people complained to the umpires, but they let him do it, and he didn't mind at all and rarely ever got hurt. To give you an idea how tough that O'Neill was, when he was playing in the minor leagues, he was playing with a ball club in Massachusetts, in Worcester, Mass. And at the time there was a gang of tough guys that hung around the ballpark, and they'd harass people going to the games. They might accost a young gentleman and take his wallet. They might steal a young lady's purse. They'd make people very nervous, always causing trouble, about 10 or 12 guys. Well, after O'Neill had been there for about a couple of weeks, he was leaving the park after a game with the pitcher. The two of them were going to get something to eat, and they were confronted by these tough guys who surrounded him. And O'Neill looked him over, wasn't nervous at all, and said to the guys, I know you're up to no good, and that's okay with me. And he got into a fighting pose and said, I only ask you send 2 guys at a time. And he got ready, and everyone looked at him, and the bad guys backed away, and they never bothered him or the ball players again, because he was ready to fight 2 guys at a time. He was a coal miner in his younger days, as I mentioned. When he was 11 or 12 years old, his job was to split the big pieces of coal into smaller pieces with a large axe. And he worked with guys twice his age and held his own. So he was a very tough guy and a valuable member of our ball club. Our left fielder was Jack Graney, who a lot of people knew was the first baseball announcer to broadcast, and he broadcast Cleveland Indians games in the 30s all the way to the early 1950s. Graney was a good outfielder, a good base runner, a guy that got on base and scored a lot of runs. He also was something of a practical joker, where one day in spring training, they were playing a college team, and in between innings, Graney left field. He disappeared for a second, and he came back riding a horse. And he stood in left field, sitting on his horse, and daring the college boys to hit a ball his way. He also was famous for having a dog named Larry, who he'd bring to the ball games, and Larry was our mascot. Larry would do all kinds of tricks. 3 of the guys would get on the ground, they'd get on their hands and knees, and Larry would take a running start and fly over all 3 guys. He'd retrieve balls in the outfield in practice and bring them back to the pitcher. Larry was so famous that he went on the road with Jack Graney, and he would perform at ball games on the road. And when they were in Washington, in the clubhouse, a letter came from President Wilson, who asked for an audience with Larry. So after a ball game, all the guys got dressed. They took Larry to the White House, where he sat down and met President Wilson for several minutes and did some tricks for him. So that was Jack Graney and his dog Larry, very, very popular guys. By 1918, the ball club had gotten better, but unfortunately, we were in the middle of World War I. And a lot of people were complaining that the ball players weren't in the military, they were ignoring it. So Washington came forward with the work or fight order. And this meant you had 2 choices. You worked in a defense plant if you were male, or you joined the army and went overseas to fight in France. So a lot of the guys went in the defense industry, but some of the Indians, including Elmer Smith, our right fielder, and a young man named Louis Guisco, who was our backup first baseman, they wound up going overseas. They were in the trenches and fighting in France. Other guys went to the defense industry so they wouldn't have to go, but the season would end on September 1st, 30 days early, because they decided everyone was needed for defense or going overseas. The Indians were in the fight for the pennant, and they finished second place to Boston. But by 1918, everyone realized the Indians were becoming a very good ball club. The following season in 1919, everybody was back from overseas, from the defense plants. The Indians had a strong ball club. But to really make it work, Jim Dunn made a really big trade, one of the better trades in Indians history. He acquired Larry Gardner, a great third baseman, and Charlie Jameson, who'd be our starting left fielder, for practically nothing from Philadelphia. Gardner was an old teammate of Tris Speaker back in Boston. He played in several World Series, a very good ball player. And Charlie Jameson was an ideal leadoff man in left field. He'd bat over 300. He'd be our guy for over 10 seasons, starting in 1919 through 1930. Acquiring these guys just about put all the pieces together. Our pitching staff had come along with Jim Bagby Jr., or Jim Bagby Sr., I should say, Stan Kovaleski, and Ray Caldwell. All of them would be 20-game winners in 1920, with Bagby winning an amazing 31 ball games. So we were pretty set to win everything. The one thing that remained was our manager position. And that was, we had a guy by the name of Lee Fole, who'd been our manager since 1916. A good manager, but people were getting tired by 1919, thinking we were good enough to win the pennant. Maybe it's because of Lee Fole we haven't taken that step. Well, there was a ball game against Boston in 1919, and Babe Ruth was still with Boston his last year. He was a pitcher then and an outfielder. And we had a situation, the guys were up by 3 runs late in the game. Boston loaded the bases, and coming to bat was Babe Ruth. And everybody was a little nervous because he was capable of hitting the ball way over the wall at League Park, which was about 50 feet high, and hitting it way beyond there and doing a lot of damage. Well, Lee Fole decided to change pitchers. He brought in a pitcher that some of the guys didn't want in there because they thought he couldn't pitch well to Babe. And they told him to keep the ball away from Babe, walk him if you have to. But this pitcher threw a ball in the outside corner. Babe took a giant swing. The ball went way up in the air, far over the wall, over Lexington Avenue, beyond 66th Street, a colossal home run. And the writers in the next day papers would say, they're pretty sure the ball's still going. No one saw it come back to earth. It was a tremendous blast. We lost the game, and everybody was ready to really kill Lee Fole because of the pitching change he made. Fole kind of knew it. He knew what was happening. He went up to see Jim Dunn in his office at League Park, and he resigned. At that point, Jim Dunn made Tris Speaker our player manager. And that was the one thing we needed to spark the ball club to be a first place team and a pennant contender. Speaker would have our guys stealing bases, hitting and running, doing all kinds of things, and popular with the players, and that's the guy they wanted to manage. So in 1919, again, we finished second, but in 1920, just about all the sports writers picked the Cleveland Indians to win the pennant. We got off to a great start in 1920. We finished April with 8 wins and 3 losses. We were in first place. We had an excellent May as well. The team was playing extremely well, and the pitching was strong, and so was the hitting. And so it went through May and June. Cleveland was in first place. The Yankees were trailing us. So was Chicago. Because in 1919, the World Series, as we all know today, was fixed. They called it the Black Sox scandal. And there were a lot of rumors going around in 1920 that some of the ball players were going to be brought to trial for what they may have done in 1919. So people thought bad things were going to happen to the White Sox. It would be between the Indians and the Yankees for first place. And now Babe was a member of the Yankees, and he would break all records by hitting 50-plus home runs, leading the Yankees to many victories. They had some very good pitching, among them Carl Mays, who threw the ball underhanded, threw it sidearm and underhand, submarine style, winning over 20 games. So it looked to be a battle between the Indians and the Yankees going forward. In August, the same things were going on. The Indians were in first place, fighting the Yankees in Chicago. In mid-August, we went to New York for a key series against the Yankees. And it was the second game of the series. It was an overcast day. It had been raining. There were no clouds, really. It was gray skies. And in those days, the umpires kept the ball in play till the last possible second. So you would have dirty baseballs. And in this instance, we had a dirty ball that was wet and grass stained and skies were overcast. It was difficult to see the ball. In the 5th inning, Ray Chapman came to bat. Carl Mays was on the mound, throwing submarine style. A lot of people believe that Carl Mays hit people on purpose, that he did it to move you away from the plate, that he wasn't worried about what he might do to a hitter. He would do it and worry about the consequences later. Earlier in the season, he hit our first baseman, Doc Johnston. The ball was going right for his head. At the last second, Johnston lifted his arm and the ball hit him in the wrist. The wrist wasn't broken, but he was out for several weeks. The players remembered that when we were in New York playing the Yankees. Ray Chapman came to bat. The guys would say later, it looked like Ray was going to bunt, try for a base hit, that he leaned forward slightly. Mays wound up and delivered, and they say that Chapman never saw the ball coming. He froze. It hit him in the left temple, fractured his skull, knocked him unconscious right there at home plate. The force of the blow was so hard, the ball bounced down the third baseline. The third baseman actually thought Ray had bunted and started to field the baseball, but Ray was laying unconscious at home plate. There were doctors in the stands that came out to see Ray. They gave him smelling salts. He woke up for a second or two, got on his feet, and started to walk towards the clubhouse with 2 guys helping him. He made it to about second base, and he collapsed there. The guys had to carry him to the clubhouse. An ambulance was called. He was taken to a New York hospital where surgeons were waiting for him. They took him into surgery, and they operated. There was a gash in his head. They opened up an incision. There was a 2-inch piece of bone broken away from his scalp, and they took it out and sent him to recovery. By now, it was the middle of the night. Some of the guys were at the hospital waiting. For a while, Ray rallied. His pulse became normal. His heart rate went down. But about 4 a.m, everything went wrong. And a few minutes later, Ray Chapman died. The only baseball player in Major League history to ever die from a pitched ball. You can imagine what the Cleveland players felt like. They were absolutely in shock. They were losing their real close friend. They couldn't believe it because some of the guys didn't go to the hospital. They knew he was hurt, but they thought he's probably injured. He'll be out for a few weeks, but he'll be back. They had no idea the seriousness of it. Back home in Cleveland, Ray had married the previous fall to Katie Daly. They were the talk of Cleveland, the number 1 couple all around. Her father was the owner of East Ohio Gas. He was going to set Ray up a business when Ray retired. And Katie was 6 months pregnant with their first child. So they had to put in a call to Katie in Cleveland and tell her to come to New York right away. Ray was seriously hurt. They couldn't tell her that he was already dead because they were feared what might happen to her and the baby. She came to New York with a friend. She came to the hotel where they met her, and as soon as she opened the door and saw the players, she knew that her husband was gone. And she would tell people, I knew it was too good to be true. Everything was just too perfect between us. Unfortunately, about 7 years later, Katie would commit suicide in California. She would have a daughter who she named Ray, R-A-E, and Ray would die of measles when she was 9 years old. So this wonderful young family, the talk of Cleveland, 7 years later would be no more. They would all be gone. Ray buried at Lakeview Cemetery, and Katie and her daughter buried at the family cemetery in Cleveland. Well, the Indians players could not even think about playing baseball. They lost a number of ball games, fell out of first place, and things didn't look good. But in September, they rallied. They came up with the battle cry. Ray would not want us to quit. We know he wouldn't want us to do that. Let's win it for Ray. They started playing good ball again. They vaulted back into first place. They held off Chicago, New York, and they would clinch the pennant at the end of September and go on to play in the World Series against the Brooklyn Robins. In 1920, the World Series was the best of 9 games. You had to win 5 to win the World Series. And this was mainly because of the owners who wanted to get more money in their pockets, because only playing 7 games meant they'd have to split more money with the players. But I believe it was after the 5th game, the owners got all the remaining money. So they were hoping the series would go to 9 games and they would earn more money in the process. Everybody in Cleveland was very excited, but the series would begin in Brooklyn. The first 3 games in Brooklyn, then home to Cleveland for 4, and back to Brooklyn for 2, if necessary. Game 1 was played on Monday, October 5th in Brooklyn, in front of a full house of people. The park was packed. Stan Kovalevsky started the game for us, and we won the ball game 3-1. Kovalevsky pitched outstanding. He'd won 25 ball games during the year and continued it through the World Series. The next 2 games, Brooklyn won easily. We were shut out. Then we were beaten the 3rd game. And though it looked like things might get a little shaky for Cleveland as we came back home down 2-1. But we had the home fans behind us in Cleveland, and the city was going absolutely nuts. It was the first time in 19 years we had won a pennant, made it to a World Series. So every fan in the city wanted to see the ball games. Of course, all 4 were sold out. All that was left was standing room tickets or general admission, which would go on sale at 9 a.m. before the ball game. And the night before, on Thursday night, before Friday's ball game, at 9 o'clock, people started lining up in front of the ticket windows to get a spot so they could get a ticket for the next day's game. All the newspapers were there to talk to people about their stories. In the middle of the crowd was a young lady in her late teens by herself without an escort, which was very unusual. So the papers came up to her and asked her, "What are you doing here with all these men and no escort?" And she smiled and said, "My friends bet me $50 I wouldn't have the nerve to do it. And I'm planning on staying all night and winning that $50. Should I already have tickets to the game, but I'm going to win this bet." And she did. She stayed all night long, and hopefully her friends did pay her off. The local people in the neighborhood saw a great opportunity to make money. Boys in the neighborhood scoured all the grocery stores, took the fruit baskets or fruit boxes made out of wood, and went selling them for a quarter to people so they'd have something to sit on. Other people made sandwiches and coffees and came by selling a sandwich for $1 or a coffee for a quarter. And people made a lot of money doing this because folks were hungry and thirsty. Of course, some people had thermoses, which people were saying later was definitely not coffee, even though it was prohibition in effect now. But people were having a fun time that night for the opening game the next day. As I mentioned, it was a sellout. Men who couldn't find tickets, they climbed telephone poles, they climbed trees around League Park to get a view of the game. People climbed on rooftops of buildings to try and get a view. There were a lot of people on the building rooftop of Andrews Moving and Storage. And a gentleman came from out of town. He couldn't find a ticket anywhere, even from scalpers. There were no tickets to be had. So he saw people on top at Andrews Moving and Storage. And he went there and he knocked on the front door, and one of the employees answered, and he said, "Is there any way possible I could go up on the roof and see the ball game? I came from out of town and there's no tickets." And the gentleman told him, "I'm sorry, sir, but being on the rooftop is only for employees of Andrews Moving and Storage." The gentleman thought for a second and said, "Well then, could I have a job?" I don't know if they gave him a job or let him up there, but that made the papers there, and it was a pretty innovative thing to say. One young man in his own front lawn had a huge tree there. He climbed to the top. He could get a view of the game. About 10 gentlemen gathered under the tree. They were waving $10 and $20 bills to the young man, which was quite a bit of money for a 10-year-old kid, and offered they would give it to him if he would come down and let them climb the tree. But he wouldn't do it. He stayed up and watched the game. And the Cleveland Press noted this. When the game ended and he came down, one of the reporters came by and told him, "Bring your dad to our office tomorrow. We have 2 tickets for you, and you could actually see the game." With all the excitement there were reporters from all around the country. Damon Runyon was there. He was still covering sports and writing columns. His headline read, "This town is red hot." And it was. All the hotels were booked. People came from all over the country to see Cleveland at League Park, what they could do in the series. Game 1 was Stan Kovalevsky again. He won the first home game for us easily, 3-1. And now the series was tied at 2 games apiece with 3 more games to play at home. The Indians had an opportunity. Now with another win, they could switch the momentum of the series and go up 3-2. Jim Bagby was slated to be our starting pitcher. Burley Grimes was pitching for Brooklyn. And Grimes was a spitballer. What he would literally do was wet the ball with his fingers. He could make it break 6 inches either way. It was very tough to hit. Spitball pitching had been outlawed in Major League Baseball, but the guys who were already throwing it were grandfathered in, and that included Stan Kovaleski as well. So you had Stan in the series and Burley Grimes. The top of the first inning with the crowd screaming and yelling, Charlie Jameson led off with a base hit. Bill Wamby was up next, and he lined another base hit for runners at first and second. That brought up our player manager, Tris Speaker, who, even though was a great hitter, he decided to bunt to move the runners over to second and third. He bunted the ball by the first base side. Burley Grimes came running over to field it, but slipped and fell and couldn't make a play. Speaker was safe, and the bases were loaded with nobody out in the first inning. You can bet the noise level there at Old League Park. You could probably hear the people downtown. There were about 28,000 people jammed into the park and standing out deep in the outfield and center field behind the rope. Elmer Smith was our cleanup hitter, a lefty. He came to bat. Grimes threw him a couple spitballs, and unfortunately, he swung and missed, was not able to connect. The next pitch was a ball, and I'm getting a restart message here, so I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, good. That's something I needed to do. The next pitch came in, and Smith would later say he wasn't sure if it was a spitball or tried to sneak a fastball by him. It was right down the plate. Smith, a good home run hitter, connected a line shot that was rising high and above the right field wall onto Lexington Avenue for a grand slam home run, the very first in World Series history, and the Indians led 4-0 after one inning. Well, Jim Bagby pitching a 31-game winner, it was doubtful Brooklyn could score 4 runs, so fans were very, very excited. But in the fourth inning, Doc Johnson got on base, and Steve O'Neill came to bat. They had a conference on the mound, decided to walk O'Neill to get to the pitcher, Jim Bagby. But they should have known Jim Bagby was one of the best hitting pitchers in baseball. The pitch came, Bagby took a big swing, and he socked the ball into the left field seats for a 3-run homer, the first home run ever hit in a World Series by a pitcher. And that record would stand for quite some time. Now we were up 7-0, and everybody knew we have this ball game. Nobody could possibly score 7 runs against Bagby. He's too good of a pitcher. The fifth inning, Brooklyn tried to rally. They got runners at first and second and nobody out. They brought up a pinch hitter for the pitcher to come up and swing. And Bill Wamby would later say he knew this pinch hitter was pretty good, so he took a few steps back near second base, thinking if he hits a ground ball, I can get it, and we could get a double play and get 2 guys out. We don't care if a runner goes to third or scores. We want to get the 2 outs. Well, the pinch hitter hit a rising line drive over second base, looked like a sure base hit. The runner from second took off for third. The runner from first took off for second. But Wamby was 6 feet tall. He took a couple steps back, made a big leap in the air, and speared the ball with his gloved hand for out number 1. When he came down, he was only a few feet from second. He saw the runner heading for third. He stepped on second for the second out. And he thought he would say later, we got the double play. I'm really happy. But our new shortstop was a man named Joe Sewell. And he yelled, Bill, tag him, tag him. And Wamby turned around. The runner from first was standing 5 feet away from him in shock. He had no idea Wamby made the catch. Wamby jogged over, tagged him on the shoulder, flipped the ball to the mound, and ran off the field. There was silence in the stands. This had happened in about 6 or 7 seconds, and people weren't sure what they saw. Within about a minute, it dawned on everybody, we've just seen an unassisted triple play, and everybody went crazy, throwing their hats on the field, yelling and dancing up and down. Wamby had done the only unassisted double play in World Series history, and that record has yet to be tied as we go to 100 years later. We won the ball game 8-1, went up 3-2, and the excitement was building as the next day, Walter Mayles was pitching for Cleveland. He come up to us from California in August and won 7 straight games. He'd been outstanding, and he came against Brooklyn, and he shut them out on 3 hits, 1-0, and suddenly we were up 4-2. Well, Mr. Dunn met with Tris Speaker to talk about the one more game in Cleveland. They decided they did not want to go back to Brooklyn under any cost. So even though we had 2 days rest, they chose Stan Kovaleski to pitch Game 7. And Kovaleski was brilliant. He threw a shutout. We scored 3 runs. The Indians won 3-0, and they were champions of the world for the very first time. You can imagine the celebrating inside League Park and outside down Lexington Avenue. People in their shops came running outside. Did we win? Did we win? People were parading and dancing downtown till late in the night as we were finally world champions. And a few days later, to celebrate, all the players went to University Circle by the Wade Park Oval, and a big crowd was there of fans, about 10,000, to celebrate. Firecrackers were going off. The guys were on a makeshift stage, and they all waved to the crowd and stood up and sang, "Take me out to the ball game." Everyone yelled and cheered, and for a moment, we were the champs. We were kings of the world and baseball champions. We were the #1 ball club. We did well in 1921. We finished in second, the same ball club. We nearly won the pennant, but that would be it, unfortunately. Jim Dunn would die of heart failure a year later. The team would fall down into 5th and 6th place. We wouldn't contend again for a long, long time. It would be till 1948 until we'd finally win another pennant and a World Series. And ironically enough, we would win it with another player manager. This would be Lou Boudreau, our star shortstop. So I was going to make some suggestions this year to the Indians, but couldn't do it, to say we ought to make Frankie Lindor our player manager. That might do it. That might get us a World Series. But I don't think the Indians might have listened to me, but they've got a good chance. They're on a hot streak. They're playing good baseball. The Yankees are tough, but I like our chances. And I know at 7 o'clock, I'm going to be glued in front of the television to see how our Indians do. They can knock off the Yankees, take 2 out of 3, and advance in the playoffs. And hopefully in this crazy season we've had, bring us home our 3rd World Series championship. Well, if anyone has any questions at all or comments, I'd be happy to entertain those now if anyone has any questions.
I do. Actually, I have 3, but I forgot the other 2. So one was, how did they travel as a team? On a bus? Did they have their own bus?
I think it was train travel. They would go by train.
Train travel.
However, when they were playing Detroit, they usually took a boat. They went down to 9th Street. There would be a boat waiting for them. It would take about 2 hours. We take them right to Detroit. They get off the boat and get cabs to the ballpark, and that's what they would do. But train travel was the optimum way to go, unless it was like a World Series, the Yankees against the Giants. They just get on a bus and they'd head there, or Boston or something like that, or Chicago. But yeah, train travel was the way to go. Let's see, was our second
Wish
question?
I could remember the other 2
Uh-oh.
questions. I don't remember them. And I didn't want to stop watching and write them down.
How about who do you think the most valuable player is on the team this season and why?
That's a tough question because the last month, Jose Ramirez has been phenomenal. He's been just sensational in his hitting. But I think I'd have to go with Shane Bieber, our pitcher. He had just a tremendous year. It was kind of like someone's got to pick up the slack for Corey Kluber, and Bieber did it amazingly well. I think he led the American League in wins, ERA, and strikeouts. So he did just a fantastic job. So he'd be my MVP with Jose Ramirez, a very close second, I think. And give a couple of votes for Manager of the Year, Sandy Alomar. He had no idea he was taking over for Tito, who got ill. Now I hope Tito is much better. And I understand he's supposed to be with us in quarantine in the bubble, and he's helping out. But I'm hoping he'll help. Did a terrific job bringing it home for us, and I'd like to see him get some recognition too.
You know, Keller Williams Realty has Red Day every year, and with Bobby's suggestion, I worked with them and cleaned up League Park that one year. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's outstanding. The
That
park
was
looks
cool.
wonderful. It looks wonderful. I'm very proud of what we have now, that you can go down there, the museum that we have, it's all just terrific. That you can stand where all these great players were, from Ty Cobb to Babe Ruth to Bob Feller to Lou Gehrig. You can stand on the pitching mound, or you can stand at home plate and just think, these guys were here doing these unbelievable things. It's really one of the great things of Cleveland. I highly urge everyone, if you haven't been down there, to take a look at it now. It's just outstanding. And it's just really a great thing the city has done, and
Do
something
you
really
think
to be happy.
do you think a 6-year-old child, a boy, would appreciate League Park or the museum?
I do. if they like baseball at all, I think they would. Yeah, I have two great nephews, and they're not quite there yet. But when they hit 6, they're getting in the car with me, and we're going to League Park for sure. And I'm going to show them around. Yeah, I think it's. I've seen a number of smaller boys and girls there, and probably in the 6 to 8 range, and I think they get something out of it. There's great things to see, and to take a walk around the park, I think, is a fun thing to do.
I have two questions. My first question is, there seemed to be a lot of different plays in 1920. Was there one play that really helped the Indians win? And my second question is, how did Lake Park survive when like Ebbets Field didn't? And there's so many other parks that.
Yeah, League
Oh,
Park.
sorry. But how did that survive and when others didn't?
Yeah, the first part of the question, I don't know if I can point to any one particular play they made or game that turned the season around, because they were in first place most of the season. But I would say the pitching of Walter Mayles down the stretch, he won 7 in a row, and the clutch hitting of Tris Speaker. There was a number of games they came from behind, and I think those were probably the highlights. Bill Wamby getting some clutch hits, Elmer Smith hitting a lot of home runs. I think everybody contributed. I can't think of one single game. I mean, there were a few games they scored 16 or 17 runs. They annihilated the guys they played. But probably one of the best games of the year was near the end. We were beating Chicago. We had to win at least 1 out of the 3 games at home. And Duster Mayles threw a shutout against Chicago. With bases loaded, he struck out the side. And that kept us in first, and I think that might have been the impetus to get us to the pennant. As far as League Park, Municipal Stadium was built in 1931. The Indians moved there in 1933. They signed a lease, but they found that attendance there, they were getting no more than 5,000 or 6,000 people a game, and that was the same they were getting at League Park. And they were in this giant facility where the new owner, Albert Bradley, had to pay ushers. He had to hire double the amount of ushers and vendors and policemen, even though there was few people there. He was losing money. So after the 1933 season, he had a clause in his lease that said if he didn't like the conditions at Municipal Stadium, he could leave. And he did. They played exclusively at League Park in 1934 into the early 40s, when they started playing night games at Municipal Stadium. They put up lights, and gradually they would play more and more there, but League Park was able to survive up until through 1946. They would play about 40 games there and about 30 some at the stadium. And so it was kind of a balance. Bill Veeck bought the ball club, and he wanted nothing to do with League Park. He was thinking in big terms, so he wanted to play exclusively at the stadium. So League Park ceased as a baseball stadium in 46. But because of playing at both, the park was able to survive. Some football was played there for some years. The Cleveland Buckeyes, our entry in the Negro League, played there for several years. And the Browns used it as a practice field. But in the 1960s, it was torn down. Most of it, just part of the grandstand and a wall remained, and the ticket office. But we rebuilt it in 2000, I believe it was 12. And now it's a very viable park where kids play and some high schools play there. So that's how we're able to maintain it as long as we did.
So I put something in the chat. I wanted to know what you think we should name the team.
Yeah, I being a historian about baseball, I'd like to see him be the Cleveland Spiders. I think they won a Temple Cup. They had some Hall of Fame players on the team. It was a great ball club here for the 11 years they played here at League Park. I think that would be something I like. I also would like to see
somebody else said.
Yeah, I'd like to see the Spiders. I would also like to see the Cleveland Forest Cities. That was the first name we had back in the 1870s, and it was done because we were the city of trees and by the lake. And the name meant a lot for a lot of years. So I kind of like that too, but I'm open to whatever.
The tribes.
Yeah, I don't know if they would do it, because if they're getting away from the Indians, they probably want to go completely away. So I don't know if that's what they would do.
Well, we're all tribes. I mean,
yeah, that's
Jewish
true.
people are tribes. Yeah. Everybody's in tribes. So yeah,
it's very true. Yeah, I like the name. If they lose the Indians, I'm okay with it. I'm okay if they keep it. The main thing to me is the ball club. And our colors have always been blue and red. So it doesn't really matter if we lose the name Indians. We can still have blue jerseys and red home jerseys, and it would still be, that's how Cleveland was for many, many years at the ball club. So I think whatever way they go, I support them. And it's my team. No matter if they're just the Clevelands, it's my team. You know, I go there to see the guys play. So the name is important, but I can live with whatever they come up with.
Well, on that note, we are just a little past 5:30. So thank you so much. This was a really great story.
Thank you.
It's ridiculous how much information he holds in his head.
And
Boys don't have anything else to do growing up.
I just love baseball ever since I'm a little kid. So that's why I continue to.
well,
That's
you're
great.
lucky you get to, excuse me, you're lucky you get to do what you love. So
Yes,
that's awesome.
I'm privileged.
Well, thank you everyone so much for your time. And thank you, Scott, so much for your presentation. We did record it, so we'll be sending out a link with everyone who attended, and we will have the recording for you guys.
Oh,
So
terrific.
thank you so much, and go Tribe tonight.
Let's go
Yeah.
try. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.